Raymond Kwok, DPM Teo. Coming back to your speech about leadership and institutions, may I ask your view and how should we look at whether there's any advanced indicator when should a leader realize that they should step down? Whether it's a continuous succession planning, whether there's a sense of things are basically need to move on and getting somebody to take on the baton. And the flip side of it, I won't say flip side, the other side about institution. When would an institution or organization, whether it is a school or whether it's a company or whether it's a government, basically give the signals that yes, things must change. And in Europe, for example, things are really messing up. But Singapore governments actually have a longevity. We are blessed with longevity governments. But there are countries which has got governments which basically changing sides every 4 years. But both countries basically have progressions. So how do we sort of look at leadership and institution continuities?
Well, the greatest leaders are the ones who know how to step aside at the right time. But, how do you know when is the right time to step aside? I don't think there's a formula for that. But there's always a temptation. Even in a football team, you've got a successful football team. It just won the whatever cup it is that you're interested in winning. It's just won. You've got a wonderful team. Now, do you start to replace the members in the team and start rebuilding the team and say, well, I keep him on for one more year, this striker, this midfielder, or this defender? Or do I start bringing in the new striker and flood him and so on? So I think you have to keep on doing that. And my own view is that once I step into a job, I start looking for somebody who can take over from me. But maybe I'm a lazy person. And I want to retire as early as possible. But I look for a person who can take over from me. And I see this as my responsibility. Because if I don't, I'm not discharging my responsibility properly. And I think that's important. Your other question was... Yeah. I think an institution which is successful will always try and sense the future, to look into the future and sense. And it will never be completely satisfied or it will never sit in its chair completely comfortably. You always have to feel a little uncomfortable, and you have to have that sense of, just that little sense of discomfort about where you are, and always look for what it is that you haven't seen. Look for that bump in the road which you didn't know was there, and always be looking for that and looking for these new opportunities. And I think that different organizations have different strategies and ways of doing that, whether it's scenario planning, various kinds of forecasting, various, consulting various people. And you have to keep on doing that.
Can I take up a couple of points you made in your speech, DPM? You talked about different aspects of leadership. I mean, you've had a very interesting career where you were a leader in the military, you've been a leader in the civil service, a political leader, a grassroots leader. Could you give us a sense of whether leadership in those different settings differs in any way? And also for the younger people, give us a sense of how you came to decide that you were going to give your life to public service, because you did ask them to think about it as well.
Well, I did say that you have to adapt to the organizations and the people that you have. And you have to adapt your leadership style and the way you speak with them and the way you bring them along with you. So you have to understand the people you're working with. So if you're working with a group of volunteers, you have to understand that the people who volunteer are often the people who are most highly opinionated, and the most highly motivated. So each of them is very likely to have stronger views than the average person. That's why he's there. If he were not having if he didn't have stronger views about it than the ordinary person, he wouldn't be there. And so you must expect that within this group of people, the chances of them having different views and disagreeing over them is higher than average. So when you're managing a group of volunteers, whether it's in a clan association or sports federation, even a voluntary welfare organization, you must expect that there will be strong personalities and they may have different views, and you have to try and work with all of them and bring them on board. Not always possible, and you have to manage some of these differences as you go along. Military organization in Singapore, in some ways, is not as hierarchical as many people think it is. For most of us, when you go into national service and all that, you really have an ant's eye view of the organization. But actually, in Singapore, because we run a national service and reserve system, you can't just run it in a command and control way. If you do that without persuading and motivating people, the whole system will break down in a relatively short period of time. So actually, as a leader in a national service and reserve army, whether you are a regular or national serviceman or a reservist yourself, you know that you have to do a lot of persuading, a lot of motivating, a lot of team building among your people in order to get your unit to work properly. Otherwise, your unit won't function properly. And so, in that sense, the military organization that we have in Singapore has a lot more in common with other organizations, other non-military organizations. You had another question.
How you came to decide on public service?
Well, when I was coming to secondary school, not so different in age from many of you, I mean, I had to decide what I wanted to do with my life. And I felt that, I was wondering, I felt that I would get more satisfaction doing something in the public service rather than in a private sector, where basically the bottom line you're working for is some company's bottom line or some shareholder's bottom line. And if I did something which was in the public sector, then the bottom line that you're working for is really, everybody's good. I felt that, there were, at various stages of my life in the school, I thought that, three professions particularly have a lot of intrinsic, you get a lot of intrinsic satisfaction from them. One of them is being a teacher. You get a lot of intrinsic satisfaction from that because you see people grow up, and the best teachers are those which are very, very happy when their students do better than themselves. I mean, you just enjoy that, watching people grow up. Then being a doctor, because you heal people, you make them better. And the third was being a civil engineer. Not just any kind of engineer, but civil engineer, because you build things, which make a difference to people and societies, whether they're bridges or roads or dams or whatever it is. I'm still fascinated by bridges and roads and dams. You watch TV, some of these programs, all these mega structures and things like that. So it was wonderful to watch how these things get built. But as it turned out, I didn't do any of them. I went into the SAF, served there for many years. But over the years as a politician, I've discovered that in a way I'm able to do a little bit of all three. You build, you nurture, and sometimes you heal. It may be not the physical person, but sometimes the spirit. So in a sense, I've been able to do all three.
Did you have any inkling in those days, as Mr. Tang has described so well, when you became, you left the NCC to become head prefect, that you might end up one day being defense minister or deputy prime minister?
No, that's a further thought from my mind.
And what was the thought on your mind when you were told that you were going to be the deputy prime minister? What was your main consideration at that time in deciding whether to take up the position?
Each time I've taken on a position of leadership, I've always felt a deep sense of responsibility, almost you can feel the weight, the responsibilities. And each time I've taken up a position of responsibility, that's what I feel. A position of leadership, you feel a sense of responsibility, and you wonder whether you are up to it and will be able to live up to that responsibility, which so many people have put, they put their faith in you, and you wonder whether you hope that you can live up to the responsibility. And your greatest concern is that somehow you fail them, and you try and you do your best for them.